Yeah.
Well, welcome to this episode of the Winter Build 2022. I'm building a Trinity Amps Custom Plexi 18 watt this year. To this point, I have mounted all the chassis mounted components, the switches, the knobs, the potentiometers, the input and output jacks, the tube sockets, terminal strips, grounding lugs. The transformers are installed. I've wired the heater string and I have wired in the power supply, and we're ready to test the power supply. So that's what we're doing today. The voltages in an amp are very high, and they're very high. Right now they'll all be AC voltages, but once we rectify everything, we have high DC voltages too. So high AC or DC voltage is very, very dangerous. It's not like getting a little tingle when you accidentally touch the lamp socket when you're unplugging it. This is voltage that can be lethal to you. So always be safe when you are applying power to an amp, when you are checking voltages, doing anything like that. If you have a live amp and the chassis is open, always be careful. Another thing you should always do, I always keep my left hand behind my back. What you want is you don't want to accidentally touch a hot wire and then with your other hand touch a ground and give a path for that electricity through your heart. That will stop your heart. So always when you are testing, keep your left hand behind your back. I usually put it in my pocket. More often than not, when I am doing this kind of testing, I also stand up. I don't sit in the chair, because if I do get hit by a jolt, and it's a serious jolt, hopefully it will throw me off the amp. And I would rather fall and get a bump on my head or a bruise on my tailbone than what the alternative to that would be. We're going to plug the power in. I have the switch in the on position, and the first thing we're going to want to look for is that the indicator light glows. If that doesn't glow, unplug right away, we have a problem. If it does glow, then we'll do the measurements and make sure our voltages are where they need to be. Be safe, like I say, one hand behind your back, and plug it in. Be ready to pull this plug out right away if things start to smoke. Okay, no smoke. We do have our indicator, so this is a really good sign. So the next thing we need to do is test the voltages. Now, what I said about hands behind your back, that's always a really good idea. Sometimes you need to actually use both hands to do probes. The good thing about doing probes, if you're not using something that is alligator clipped on, whenever you can, you alligator clip your ground and then just use one hand to probe. But sometimes you have to use two hands to probe. Use pointed probes, things that aren't going to grab onto those tabs or those connections and hold on. Also, because they're plastic, hold on to the plastic part of the probes and hold them as far back as you can. We're going to check that we have our mains voltage, 120 volts, between the line and neutral tabs on the IEC connector. We know we've got voltage because we're seeing lights, but as I've said before, never think of a reason not to check something. So I'm set to AC here to the 270 volt range, and yep, I've got 120 volts there. And always note these things on your instructions so you can refer back to this later. We should have 120 volts AC across the indicator as well. And yep, 120 volts there. When we unplug this, not while it's plugged in, but when we have unplugged it, we will feel the transformers to see if they're hot. And by the way, I did tape off all of the open or unconnected leads of the transformers. It's best to tape those ends off so nothing can short anywhere. And I do have a little smoke happening here, so we are going to unplug this. Yeah. I said in the last video where I had wired up the power supply that I could have tested it then, but I had a reason for waiting and doing it as a separate video, this video. And that was it, smoke. So everything was going really well. I had powered it up. We had light coming from the indicator. I was able to check my incoming mains voltage, which was 120 volts as expected. It was 120 volts across the indicator. I was just going to start measuring the voltages supplied to the heater wires when I noticed a few wisps of smoke. I also could hear the transformer was arcing internally. If you've never heard that, it sounds kind of like a simmering tea kettle, and that smoke was basically copper fumes. The fumes can be irritating particularly to your eyes and your sinuses, and it can give you kind of a sore throat. So I started noticing that as well. So immediately I turned the amp off. Now, by way of a bit of explanation, of course, I'm wearing different clothes because that all happened a week ago. You're seeing this video actually 2 weeks after the fact. What you want to do if that ever happens is once you have safely disconnected the power, as soon as you can, you want to do a visual inspection on the transformer or whatever part you think is faulty or having a problem. The reason you want to do that right away is visual inspection is important, but also you want to feel the component. And I felt around on the transformer, and it felt okay, but when I got kind of close to this side of the transformer, it started feeling warm, and then I put my hand up here on this top corner near the output wires for the heater supply, and it was very hot there, and I could feel some sticky sort of burning plastic. And I took a look, and sure enough, I don't know if you can see this, there is a burn spot right there. So that insulation was melting from the heat. So right off the bat, to me, that says that the transformer is arcing internally. It doesn't necessarily mean that's where the problem is. So the first thing I did was remove the transformer, disconnect all of the wires, and take the transformer right out. And then before doing anything else, you can check whether it's something that you did. Because this was a check of the voltages and just checking that we had the approximate voltages we needed in places, there are no other components installed, no other connections. Basically, that transformer was just connected to these terminals, and then those wires, those connections weren't going anywhere. It was just a good, safe time to check the voltages in the transformer. So once I've removed the transformer, I left everything else wired the way I had it, and then I did troubleshooting. I did tracing. So the first thing I did was I checked the continuity again on the heater string, because one thing I didn't check before was whether there was a short between the black and red wires, and that could have easily caused this problem. In particular, like I say, the damage seems to be right near the output wires for the heater supply. The next thing to do is just check that you don't have any shorts anywhere. So I've got my ohm meter set up here. It's on 200 ohms. You could also use the beep test if you want. And that's an easy way to not have to just look up and see if everything's working. If you hear the beep, you know that you've got your continuity. So the first thing that I checked was the connections going to the heater string, the red and black wires, which is also where the green wires had connected from the transformer. And what you want to do is you want to test between those two and make sure you don't get a beep. There should be no connection between the red and black wire. That would be a short, and we don't. We're good here. The reason you can't test that when the transformer's connected is it would essentially show up as a short. So you couldn't have checked that with the transformer in place. It wouldn't have really told you anything. I've checked the black and red. There's no shorts there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave my my probe on the black wire, and then I'm just going to trace the black wire all the way through on the heater string. And we're good there. We have continuity. We have continuity on that. So both of the output tubes, the preamp tubes, and the other one hiding under here. We're good all the way through on the black wires. So now we're going to do the same thing with the red wires on the string. And to that output tube, again, we're good there. To pin 4 and pin 9 of the phase inverter, and we're good there. Pin 4, pin 9 of V2, and pin 4, pin 9 of V1. A little hard to reach under there. So our heater string is good. So as I said, I'm not going to show you this, but I did check that for all of the other connections. Because there are no tubes installed, there's no turret board, essentially no other components installed, all of these connections really don't go anywhere else. The wires for the heaters and the high voltage to the rectifier are all disconnected now, but nothing was coming off that tube going anywhere else except for this wire that was going to the standby switch, which I hadn't turned the standby on, so it's just a dead end wire. So that's not really connecting to anything. And then I just checked all of these wires point to point to make sure I had no shorts and nothing wrong in there, and it was all fine. So I had said in a previous video that I've had things that I've built before that didn't work first shot, but I couldn't recall ever having built an amp that the first time I fired it up, it didn't work just fine. So this was a new thing to me. I've had to repair plenty of amps. I've had plenty of amps that have developed shorts in their transformers and whatnot. So a first for me. I contacted Stephen right away. Trinity Amps is really, really good at their tech support. Stephen Kors is very approachable, a very nice guy to talk to. I've spoken with him on the phone. I've emailed with him, and he really cares that your kit goes well. Being that we talked, I just said, you know, here's what happened. Here's what I've done. I sent him a picture of that melted spot on the insulation on here. And I said, you know, my assessment is that this power transformer is faulty. And he got right back to me, and he agreed. And he said, yeah, we're sending another transformer. That was a Saturday morning that I contacted Stephen. And I got an email right back from him. They were sending another one out first thing Monday morning. I've got tracking on that. The transformer hasn't arrived yet. It's not going to arrive for a few more days. So how do you test a bad transformer? Most of you won't have the kinds of tools that you need to test a transformer. I certainly don't have most of those. I have a few things. One thing you can do is build a light bulb current limiter. You can look that up. I'll do a video about that at some time. And that would at least tell you if you have shorts of some kind in your amp, whether they're in the transformer or you know, a output tube is shorted somewhere or anything else is shorted. It's not very sophisticated, but it is helpful. So look up a light bulb limiter and what you can do with that. The only way you can sort of troubleshoot or assess a transformer when it fails is basically by the symptoms. And doing all the measurements I did in the amp, we don't have any problems with the wiring there. Everything is okay. So the only other thing it could be is in the transformer, and we have a pretty clear indication that it is the transformer. Another thing, a transformer arcing internally is different than a transformer having a direct short. So as I said, I could hear that it was arcing internally, and I could smell the smoke and see the smoke, and I could feel the heat there. Again, don't touch the transformer if you think you have that sort of issue and it's powered up. Okay, so I think it's come to a point in this video where There's some time jumping, so probably a mid-video recap is in order here. So the first part of this video after the intro, the part where I start testing the power supply and then I discover smoke, that was all shot 2 weeks ago. Today is February 4th, 2022, and that part of the video was shot on January 21st, 2022. The next part of the video, the troubleshooting part, everything basically after I discovered the smoke and up to now, was filmed last week. That was January 28th, 2022. So now, as I say, it's February 4th, and the replacement transformer came in a few days ago, actually I think on Monday. So I was just getting ready to rewire that in. I'm not really going to show wiring it in. I'm going to do it off camera, basically because the procedure is no different than what I did. But as I said a little while ago in this video when I was troubleshooting, the indication of the damage was right there on the transformer. It doesn't necessarily mean that's where the problem is. My assessment was that the transformer was faulty, and all of the symptoms and troubleshooting seemed to indicate that, but I was wrong. I made a mistake. I've made some notes here. I'm going to bring those over and refer to it rather than to kind of keep looking off and looking back and looking off. So I was getting ready to solder in this new transformer. You can see I've mounted it here. I was taping off the wires just so it would make it really easy for me to go through, twist them together, and resolder everything. So I have the two green wires taped off here. These are going to be twisted together, and if you recall, those are for the heater or filament supply of the output tubes and the preamp tubes. The green wire with the yellow stripe goes to ground, and then for the rectifier, we have a yellow-white wire, a yellow wire, and a white wire. So the yellow-white and the yellow wire will twist together, and those are the filament or heater supply for the rectifier tube. And the white wire is a higher voltage. It's a 6.3 volt AC winding, and that would be used for a different rectifier. We're using a 5AR4, so it needs 5 volts AC, so we are using the yellow wire with the white stripe and yellow wire. So those need to be twisted. Then I went over to the other side, and the high voltage windings, again, we have a red wire with a yellow stripe. That will go to ground. And the two red wires are the high voltage supply, and those twist together and then connect as I described before. The white wire and black wire twist together, solder together, and they go over to our common power point over here. And then I got to the two pairs, the white with the red stripe and the black with the red stripe, and the white with the black stripe and the black with the white stripe. So you can see it can get a little confusing. This is where the mistake was. In the other video, in part 5, at 6:19, I described twisting the black and white pair of wires together and soldering them to the common point, and that's correct. And at 6:25, I say that we need to tie the black-red and white-red wires together. They will go up to the power switch. And the white wire with the black stripe and black wire with the white stripe are the 110 volt windings. They don't get connected together. We heat shrink the ends, wind these up, and just tuck them out of the way. This is where I made the mistake, though. At 7:17 of that video, and it may still be in there now or not, I haven't decided yet whether I want to take that little segment out in case anybody's blindly following me on a build like this. I don't want them to make the same mistake I made. I do know how I can cut that segment out, but if I can actually put a tile in there saying, hey, this part's wrong, watch part 6, I will do that. So at that point, I thought I had read this enough and it was fresh in my mind enough because I had just described it, that I would just go wire these. Well, what happened was the white wire with the black stripe and the white wire with the red stripe are side by side, and the black wire with the white stripe and black wire with the red stripe are side by side. So I talked before in another video about getting motor set, just being motor set and going on and doing the job. I actually twisted the wrong wires together for these two pairs. I wasn't exactly working fast. I just it was just an error. People make mistakes sometimes. I'm lucky that wasn't worse. But I caught it when I was trying to, or when I was getting ready to rewire this in, and I thought this whole video is actually a pretty good video in terms of how to troubleshoot, how to come up to a surprise on an amp, then look through, figure out and assess where the problem is or may be, and then even double checking when you think you fixed that problem. Because if I had not been doing this, I wouldn't have found that. If I had just taken the power supply I thought was bad and then just sort of aped everything that was on here, I would have made the same mistake again, because here you can see I've got the white wire with the red stripe and white wire with the black stripe twisted together and soldered together, and here tied off are the black wires with the white stripe and red stripe. So as I say, if I hadn't gone back to the instructions and looked at everything and confirmed that I was doing it right, which you should be extra careful when you've had a problem, I could have caused the same problem again. As I said, I contacted Stephen with my initial assessment of the problem, and I had been very thorough in that. And his support is really good, as I've said before. They sent out the transformer. I received it a few days ago, and now I'm going to wire that new transformer in. But I have to eat a little bit of crow. I've got to email Stephen back and say, hey, I was wrong. I just found out I created a wiring problem. So the transformer probably was fine. But I don't think this is a warranty issue, so let me know and I'll pay you for that replacement transformer. In that regard, the other transformer may or may not still be functional. It did have a melted spot at the outputs for the filament windings, and anytime you see a melted wire, a brown wire, that one had cooked a little bit, but it wasn't black, or a black burn spot, you have damage. So the component may still work, but it may have a very shortened lifetime. In particular, when you talk about things shorting, arcing, or burning, an outright short that causes a burn, you probably have a dead power transformer in that case. This one, where it's a very light brown spot and it was hot, and I could hear it arcing, it may not be damaged to the point of not operating, but that arcing inside, that creates a carbon path wherever it arcs. And the more it arcs, the more conductive that little path becomes. So you have a situation where that transformer can break down over time, especially if you're going to drive it hard. And I do drive my amps pretty hard, especially now that I use IRs and not live cabinets. I usually am winding them out pretty far. So it could seem to work. You could fix it, and then a month or two down the road, it just dies again. So my approach is, if I'm doing it for myself, and especially on a new build, I'm going to put a known good transformer in. If I end up keeping possession of that transformer as well, I may, out of curiosity, use it down the road. Maybe I can, knowing the condition it's in, maybe I can do some kind of video involving that. But on a new build, we want to know we start with a good platform here. When you're repairing something, it can be a different story. If I had been using this amp already for several years or whatever, and I somehow was doing some work and miswired that, at that time and caused this issue, but caught it as quickly as I did, I might go in there and just wire it back in properly and see if it works, and then be aware that I've had this issue and I may have to replace that transformer. When it comes to doing that as a repair for somebody else, you make your recommendations, and then you ask the customer or client how they would like to proceed. So if this had been somebody else's amp, and of course, if I hadn't been the one who wired it wrong, if I had wired it wrong, that's my responsibility to rectify that issue. But if somebody brought me an amp and it was already in that condition, and I found that, I would say, here's the situation. The transformer was wired wrong. I can wire it up properly and we can see if it works, but there is damage there. So the amp may appear to work, but that transformer could fail down the road. Would you like me to put in a new transformer for that at whatever cost that is? Or do you want me to wire it up properly, see if it works, and then we go from there? I always strongly recommend fix it right. But power transformers and output transformers are, as I've said before, the expensive part of the amp. So the end user may say, well, wire that up without a new one. Let's see if it works. Do the testing you can do to see that there's no problem. What I would caution the owner to do then is to pay attention when you fire up the amp, at least for the first while. When you turn it on, kind of get your ear close to that transformer, listening to see if you can hear any arcing. Other things you would want to watch for is the indicator lamp flashing, although that's a very common thing for them to just do. But watch for things, indications that the amp is not performing the way it's supposed to. You might even hear some strange things out of the amp. And if that's happening, don't go long enough until, well, this is working, I'll just wait till it fails. Because when things like transformers fail, they can fail pretty spectacularly. They could take out the whole amp. They also, as I say, are dangerous. It could start a fire. Depending on where it shorts, it could be an issue for electrocution. So when I talk to people about that, if I'm repairing an amp, I strongly suggest putting the new component in, and I also make it clear that if we decide to leave the old component in, I cannot be responsible for its failure down the road. All that said, I'm going to go off camera, wire the transformer back in, make sure I've got everything connected right this time, and I'll do all of that off camera, and then I'll come back and do the testing. Okay, I've wired in the replacement transformer, double, triple, quadruple checked all of the wiring. It is exactly right now. I have not made any mistakes this time. Another thing that I added in this 220k resistor and 0.01 microfarad capacitor here across the standby switch. I installed that now. It's not necessary for this testing, but it's going to need to be there when I do the next part, which is going to be populate and install the turret board. So I did it now. I won't have to do it later. So that's a change, but won't affect the testing. Checking all the wiring, everything looks right. So I'm ready to power it up. One thing that I am doing, I talked about using a current limiter. A current limiter won't tell you much in this instance because there's nothing actually connected at the other ends of these wires. In other words, the power's not going anywhere, it's just terminating. But what the current limiter will tell us in this instance, and would have told me previously on my last test, is if I have a short or not. So with the amp plugged into the current limiter, we will see this bulb up here. This is my overhead lamp, which usually has an LED bulb in it, but I put an incandescent in there. You need an incandescent to properly use a light bulb current limiter. At any rate, if I have any shorts, this light bulb will go on. The light bulb is actually in series with the amp. So if the amp has a short, it will draw a lot of current, and it will cause the light bulb to light. It also will limit the amount of current that can go through the amp, so potentially limiting any damage. If the bulb doesn't light, In this case, nothing is shorted, and that's a good thing. So all we're watching for on this one today is for this to light or not light when I plug the power in. The other thing I have on my current limiter, I have a switch on mine. So when I have it switched one way, right now if it's switched that way, the lamp is in series with the power going to the amplifier. If I switch the switch the other way, it takes the lamp out of the equation and puts full power to this socket that the amp is plugged into. So that's just a quick way to get the bulb limiter out of the circuit. So that said, we're ready to test. I am going to plug it in right now. First thing we're going to watch for, the indicator lamp should still light. This bulb should not do anything. And if that's good, we're probably okay. Before I turn the current limiter off, I will just kind of get my head close to see if I can hear anything, maybe arcing or sparking or have any, odd smells. And if that's okay, we will take it to full power mode, and then we will start measuring the voltages. Another thing with regard to that, with measuring the voltages, other than the incoming mains line, which will be 120 volts, or should be 120 volts, and the power across the indicator lamp, which also should be 120 volts, everything else will be coming out on the other side of the transformer. They will be AC voltages. They will be stepped up or stepped down. The voltages will be higher than we expect, and that's because there is no load on this. Like I said, all those lines are just going and sitting on terminals. The power isn't going anywhere. There's no circuit for it to complete. So there's a higher potential of voltage there without being loaded down by the components. So, for example, on the heater string to the output tubes in the 12AX7s, we expect under normal operation to see about 6.3 volts AC there. Without any load on there, we'll probably see around 7 volts AC. So with all of these, the voltages will be 10-ish% higher than you would expect. So that said, let's plug this in and see if we have an uneventful few minutes. All right, indicator lamp is on. No light on the current limiter, so it's looking okay. I don't think we have any shorts here right now. I'm just going to let it run for another few seconds, and then I'll give a listen on the transformer. You don't want to get too close. You don't want to touch these things. This is a live amp now, even though it's on a current limiter. So we're going to do a sniff test, and we're going to do a noise test. It's normal for a transformer to hum very quietly. If you get down there and you notice a little hum or buzz, that's normal. It's if you notice, if it's noticeably loud, if you could hear it right here, that would be a problem. Same thing with the arcing. If I could hear arcing right now, that would be a problem. Sometimes you won't hear the arcing till you get a little bit closer. So we will do that smell test and that hearing test. And we aren't going to touch anything in there because the amp is live, but when we are done testing, we will disconnect the power, and then we are also going to do a field test and visual inspection of the transformer to make sure everything's okay. So this is all looking good. The fuse is holding, the indicator lamp is on. Probably our voltages would be accurate to read right now with the current limiter engaged, but I'm going to take it out, so we're actually measuring for sure the full voltages that are coming into the amp. And like I say, on mine I have a switch that I can do that with. So there we are, full voltage. We have no sparks, no smoke, nothing arcing, no humming. This is a good sign. So we want to check that we have 120 volts AC coming in on the mains. So from the line tab on the IEC connector and the neutral tab, we want to put our probes across there, and we should see 120 volts-ish AC on the meter. And there we go, 120 volts AC. Next thing we want to measure is the voltage across the indicator lamp, which also should be 120 volts AC. It's just right across the input supply line just after the switch. And we're getting 120 volts AC there. Everything good so far. This is where I started noticing the smoke last time, so I'm just having a look. I'm going to give a little listen because I forgot to do that. I don't smell any smoke. I can hear the quiet hum of the transformer. So looking normal so far. So the next thing we want to measure is the heater voltage on the rectifier. So this is a 5AR4 rectifier. So that's the yellow and yellow with a white stripe connections on pin 2 and pin 8 of the rectifier socket. We want to see that we get 5 volts there. Again, a 5AR4 rectifier has a 5 volt heater supply. If we were using a different rectifier, we might be using the 6.3 volt AC. We can also measure that at the white wire we've tucked off to the side here. I'll do that just for thoroughness, I guess. But across pin 2 to 8 of the rectifier, we've got 5.8 volts. So about 10%ish high, and that's what we expect because there's no load here. We're going to check the 6.3 winding for the rectifier heaters. Even though we're not using it, it would be good to know if we're getting the voltage we should there or not. It could indicate a problem. We will put the one probe on the on pin 2 of the rectifier where that yellow wire is connected. That's the common wire for these windings. And then the other probe will just go here where we've tacked that white wire. And yeah, there we are. We've got 7 volts AC. So again, 10% high, but normal. The next thing we want to measure is the high voltage line. Now here's where we have to be very, very careful because we are going to see anywhere from about 580 to about 650 volts AC. That's considerably higher than what comes out the wall. So again, be careful. We do have to use the 2 probes, but we're using plastic bodied probes and I'm holding them fairly far back and I'm making sure not to get my hands near any of the chassis or anything that could ground me. So switch your meter to the 700 volt range, and then we are going to measure the voltage across pins 4 and 6 of the rectifier socket. And there we go. We are getting 625 volts AC. That's what we expect. So the high voltage winding is good too. No problems there. We have 2 more things to check, which kind of really are one, and it's just the voltage on the heater string going to the output tubes and the 12 AX7s. We should see across the output tubes from pin 2 to pin 7, we should see 6.3 volts AC. And then on the 12 AX7s, from that pin 4-5 combination and pin 9, across those, we should also see 6.3 volts AC. First, this output tube. So there we are getting 7 volts AC, so that's good. Next output tube, same thing. 7 volts AC, so good. Now across 4-5 and to pin 9. We see 7 volts AC, looking good. And then on V2, we are getting 7 volts AC. And V1, same thing, 4-5 and 2-9, and we are getting 7 volts AC. Everything is looking really good. All our voltages are in the right range. I am deliberately leaving this running a little longer. I just want to give it a good chance to kind of start cooking and see if any other problems become apparent. So just getting some things out of the way here. Everything is going, seems to be running well. We have no smell of smoke. I'm not hearing any noises I shouldn't hear from the transformer. The indicator is bright and it's not flickering. So the next thing I'm going to do, like I said, is I'm going to unplug the power to the amp, and then I'm going to do a visual and a touch inspection of the transformer. It could be a little bit warm. There's not anything really drawing current through it right now except for the indicator lamp. So I'd be kind of surprised if it were very warm. It might be a little bit warm, probably not. So there we are. Indicator lamp is off. We have unplugged the power going to it. The amp's plugged in here, but this is where the power goes into the current limiter, so that's unplugged. And yeah, the transformer is absolutely cool. Well, second test, uneventful, and that's what we want. Everything is looking good. The new transformer is in. Everything is wired correctly. I have, of course, dressed and run all the wires neatly, and the amp is looking good. So we are ready to go on to the next step, which is to populate the turret board and then connect the turret board, and basically the amp will be ready to fire up then. So next video I will be populating the turret board for sure. Depending on time, we will connect the turret board as well to all of the outboard components. If there's not enough time, that will be in the video after next. So we're looking at sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I guess, that this amp will be ready for some actual play testing, and then I will do a demonstration video of it. So thanks for watching. The links to my band One Soul Thrust are in the description below, as always. I really appreciate that you guys are following, commenting, liking, and sharing my videos. It's really helping, and I appreciate that a lot. So until the next video, we'll see you.